colleagues, dear participants, in 2024, global CO2 emissions reached a record high, and for the first time, the planet experienced 1.5% degrees Celsius of warming. To keep the Paris climate goals within reach, we need urgent and decisive action. And there is growing recognition that cities, which account 70% of emissions, must be at the heart of that response. As part of that momentum, CHAMP, the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnership, was launched at COP28 in 2023. CHAMP is a groundbreaking commitment now endorsed by 75 countries to work more closely with regional and local governments on climate change. And I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate the Global Covenant of Mayors, GCOM, on this powerful initiative. Thank you, Mr. Asif Shah, for joining us today and co-hosting this session. Where are you? Great, welcome. The OECD has long worked on putting cities and regions at the core of climate policy responses, focusing in particular on the need for effective multi-level partnerships across levels of government and also across sectoral ministries. As part of this, we launched in 2023 the Territorial Approach to Climate Action and Resilience program, the so-called TACAR. I love very much the acronym TACAR. It sounds very strong. TACAR helps governments at all levels turn global commitments into place-based action. It's a joint program with the OECD Environment Directorate, and we are pleased to have Director Joe Tyndall with us today. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. The TACAR framework offers three things. First, it provides 45 subnational climate indicators to help policymakers monitor both climate actions and resilience across cities and regions. Second, it provides a policy framework articulated around 9 pillars to guide place-based climate action. And third, it showcases 36 leading practices from countries, regions, and cities to provide inspiration for policy makers around the world. Today, we are taking the next step. We are going national, we are going local, using this TACAR framework, and we are pleased to launch the first national review focusing on Japan and the first city case study focusing on Yokohama in Japan. Let me now say a couple of words about both reports. The first report, which is here you are. I think you have them on the website, but also available there. This first report, A Territorial Approach to Climate Action and Resilience in Japan, shows the wide variation in emissions between Japan's region. This is something that we have been doing at the OECD, is to show exactly this type of variation between cities and regions. For instance, in Japan, emissions per capita are 10 times higher in the prefecture of Yamaguchi, home to emissions-intensive industry, than in the prefecture of Nara, where actually renewable energy is more common. The report also shows the variation between places in climate risk. For example, more than 80% of the population of the Niigata prefecture is at risk of river flooding compared to national average of 10.6%, 80, 10.6. So it's very, very large, the difference. The great news is that Japan is committed to place-based climate action to reflect on this granularity. Japan can count on its strong subnational government, which are responsible of over 85% of climate-related public spending, which is actually the highest share in the OECD. The average for the OECD is 63%. And Japan can also count on the strong leadership of its subnational government. 60% of them have pledged to reach net zero by 2050. And the prefectures of Fukuoka, Ibaraki, and Sendai, actually, they have set target for 2030 instead of 2050. That is 20 years ahead of the national goal. The OECD report on Japan acknowledges this ambitious and make three specific recommendations to advance this climate agenda for the national government. First, further align national and local climate action. Unlike countries like Germany, for instance, Japan does not yet systematically engage subnational governments in the development of national strategy, and local commitment, they are still not referenced in its NDC in Japan, unlike countries like Canada and the UK, for instance. Second, scale up place-based initiatives such as the decarbonization leading areas and circular and ecological economy programs. These are two great initiatives. They provide grants and technical supports for local innovation. But the question is that smaller municipalities, they need more awareness campaigns and capacity building to fully participate. Third, diversify sources of funding and financing for subnational climate action. Japan's subnational government could make greater use of environmental taxes, for instance, land value capture, biodiversity offsetting, payments for ecosystem services, and environmental bonds. Let me now say a few words on our second report, which zoom in on the case of Yokohama, which is that one. Sorry, I show that one. That one is for, the green is for national and the blue for the local. So Yokohama already succeeded in reducing emissions by 25% over the past decade, with levels now lower than many other major cities in the OECD, including, for instance, Montreal and Rome. But Yokohama is also facing growing climate risk. In Yokohama, the number of extremely hot days each year has almost tripled since the 1980s, and the incidence of heavy rainfall has doubled. Our report recommends Yokohama scale up promising pilot projects like Minato Mirai 21, which partners with local businesses to build a net zero neighborhood, as well as neighborhood scale waste to energy projects. Yokohama could also boost impact by strengthening climate collaboration with neighboring cities, such, for instance, developing a joint plan with the Tokyo metropolitan area. Finally, Yokohama could expand land value capture for green investment and explore carbon pricing with neighboring governments like Tokyo or Saitama. These are just a few insights from the first national and city case studies using the TACAR framework. I believe they offer valuable lessons, not only for Japan, but for many countries and cities around the world. I would like to thank the government of Japan for its leadership, and especially Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Yutaka Matsuzawa, for championing this agenda globally. So going forward, we must collectively, all of us, keep up the momentum on place-based climate action. The IPCC's report, special report on climate action and cities is a key opportunity. I'm delighted that the OECD is engaged and will contribute to it. Through TACAR, we will continue supporting all levels of government in advancing place-based climate action. And next month, we will add to this support by launching our new OECD climate monitor for regions and cities at the OECD ministerial meeting of the Regional Development Policy Committee that is going to be taking place in Warsaw, Poland. The climate monitor will be integrated into the OECD local data portal and will allow all users to visualize more than 150 climate change mitigation and adaptation indicators across all OECD regions and cities. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to a productive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramya. Second opening remarks from Jo Tyndall, Director of Environment Directorate of the OECD. Jo, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks very much, Tadashi, and thank you, Lamia. I had the pleasure and privilege to be in Yokohama a couple of weeks ago to launch the most recent environmental performance review of Japan, and stayed in a hotel that was right across the road from the, the photograph on the cover of the report Lamia held up. There was a special chapter that looked very much at place-based approaches to dealing with climate. So it is a real pleasure to be here with you on Sustainable Cities Day, and to speak about the joint work between the Environment Directorate and CFE, particularly where we're taking a place-based perspective to climate action. So yes, like Lamia, I love the acronym TACA, the Territorial Approach to Climate Action and Resilience, which aims to better support local governments to develop and implement their climate plans, strategies, and policy instruments to really drive ambitious climate action. So why is that important? For me, anchoring climate action really needs to happen at every territorial level, including in urban, rural, and regional development policies, because getting this right brings powerful levers to global action on climate change. Already, as everyone here in this room, I'm sure, knows, more than half the global population lives in cities, which in total are responsible for around 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. And this trend of urbanization is, of course, only growing. At the same time, the direct impacts of climate change are felt at the local level. And let's not forget, many cities are in coastal areas. So local communities not only experience sea level rise or severe weather events, but at firsthand, but they often can bring valuable insights as a result on how these should be anticipated and managed. So just one quick example from our work, the Netherlands took a community-led flood risk management approach, incentivizing local stakeholders, including residents, farmers, and municipal authorities, to collaborate by creating spaces for rivers to safely overflow during periods of high water. Now, at the same time, of course, the capacity of local governments to address climate changes is dependent on numerous factors, economic, social, geopolitical, to name a few. So some regional economies might, for example, face particular challenges in reducing their dependence on hard to abate high carbon industries, or their topology might make it especially difficult to deal with local vulnerabilities to climate related risks. As a result, local authorities can really bring a lot to the climate solutions table. First, they understand local climate risks and the greenhouse gas mitigation potential that can be realized. Second, they're often directly responsible for planning, implementing, and financing local adaptation and mitigation action. Third, they are well placed to monitor progress in reducing emissions and in strengthening resilience. Yet local climate action is very much dependent on the national contexts in which it is embedded. That is, their central government's fiscal, regulatory, and policy settings. These define the parameters within which local governments can operate. And tackling climate change is therefore always going to be a shared responsibility across different levels of government. Local government can't go it alone without a framework set at a national level, whether that's legal or regulatory. National governments are needed to overcome barriers, foster coordination, and reduce regional inequalities, some of which I think Lamia has touched on. On the other side of the coin, territorial approaches are going to allow countries and regions to really unlock their potential in both reducing emissions and building a more resilient society. They can do that by tailoring climate action to the specific local needs, as well as taking advantage of potential strengths. In 2023, we took stock of the leading practices from countries, regions, and cities, and this informed the development of our policy framework to support decision makers in unlocking more effective climate action and resilience. The framework sets out the kinds of actions national and local governments can take for an effective territorial approach. And I'll just very quickly run through some of our main recommendations from that framework as food for thought for today's discussion. First, I think this is a bit of a theme through much of what the Environment Directorate does. First, policymakers should integrate a place-based perspective into climate policy. And what does that mean? It means that emissions and climate risks should be measured at multiple scales from national to local levels. This is essential to ensure that local circumstances are reflected in national plans. Second, climate objectives should be embedded, not only in national but also in rural and regional development policies to ensure optimal action is integrated and promoted and happens at the right scale. And finally, policymakers' main job is to strengthen the legal and institutional environment, to build coordination mechanisms, but also to diversify funding streams and improve financing mechanisms. Once these factors are in place, local climate action can be scaled and local actors are going to be well represented. So climate change, we know, is going to pose new and ever more complex and interconnected challenges, from increasingly frequent and severe extreme weather events to what at the moment seem to be rapidly shifting economic and social dynamics. The solutions to this cannot be top-down only. Whether at a national, regional, or local level, all layers of government need to work together, and this is more critical than ever before. A territorial approach provides the foundation for doing just that, helping us to build more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable communities in the face of a rapidly evolving climate landscape. So thanks for the opportunity to speak. I am looking forward to a good and lively discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean, for your intervention. Now the third opening remarks from Paolo Caridi, Deputy Director, DG Clima, European Commission.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And it's always difficult to speak as a third keynote speaker, and also after an excellent lunchtime masterclass, because I'm afraid I will repeat some of the elements. But let me maybe be a bit shorter on the importance of city, because that was mentioned already, huge percentage of emissions, but also crucially, very much vulnerable also to the impact of climate change. And I think the fact that these two elements need always to be taken into account together, I think it's one of the key elements was already mentioned. I think I can be relatively quick. In Europe, the figures on cities are even more striking at the global level, because 85% of GDP is produced in cities, 70% of employment. So in terms of urbanization, of course, the situation in Europe is even a much bigger concentration of population, wealth, emission, and climate risk is happening in cities. So in a way, we can say we are at the forefront of this. And cities are really the place where all issues converge and where there is a need to have a systemic approach. I think this has been mentioned already quite a few times, but I think it's very important, because the position of city as, on one side, making the net zero transition a reality, but also improving preparedness, is what at the end of the day will determine the success or failure of our fight against climate change. Climate change is, of course, it's a moral imperative, but it's also a practical necessity, because we need also to foster competition, prosperity, and resilience. And local climate action should create at the same time, of course, the a framework which allows this to happen, while creating also opportunity for growth, job creation, better quality, but also obviously making sure that resilience is improved and emissions are reduced and ideally go to zero. So climate neutral and resilient city should offer a safer, more attractive environment for the citizen, obviously, but also for businesses and also for tourists and visitors. And it can be, in fact, a competitive advantage for cities to become carbon neutral and resilient at the same time. Now, allow me to say a few words on what we are doing at EU level with cities. We have been having more than 15-year experience supporting local climate action. We have a EU Covenant of Mayors, which is the European version of GCOM, which has been the first initiative, which is involving local authority as a national government. And this is really about planning and implementing transition on the ground. We have also more recent initiatives, notably two what we call missions, EU mission, one on city and one specifically on adaptation, which are really underscoring the vital role cities play in various policy areas, notably, as I said already, decarbonization and resilience. Now, three key takeaways of this 15-year experience, which were, I think, mentioned by and large before. First, local actors are aware and are ready to take ambitious action. What I particularly liked during the masterclass was mentioned they are less affected by geopolitical consideration, they are less affected by nationalistic consideration. They basically they are aware and they want to do things. They want to emulate each other. I would even say they want to compete to be more ambitious than others because, as I said, it's also a competitive factor. Other point, local climate action extends beyond climate alone. I mentioned it before, but it's super important that all threats meet because this affects citizen life. It provides solutions which can be tailor-made, and that can only happen, obviously, at local level. And last element, mentioned by Joe in particular, local authority cannot act in isolation. It's quite clear. We need a multi-level governance approach from the most local to, I would say, the global level, passing through national, multinational, and the EU, in our case, level, obviously. Now, allow me to conclude 2 points which were mentioned as a bit of a thread of this session. First, the participation of local and regional authority in defining national determined contribution. We believe this is absolutely vital. And if I can give you an example from the EU experience, as you know, we have national energy and climate plans, which every member state has to draft. And for us, it's very important that there is an active engagement of subnational government and also local actors. Of course, the legal obligation falls on national governments. However, there is a push to use a multi-level governance approach, and in particular, making sure that when drafting national plan, local plan are taken into account and making sure they fit the local needs. And this can only happen at city level. In a short, ensuring the most suitable level of government as the competence and resources to implement the plan, together with access to funding, obviously, allow basically this to happen. The second and last element is that reconciling short-term economic and political challenges with long-term environmental sustainable goal is increasingly urgent. There is a gap between the impact of our activity on the climate and the resulting consequences. And I think it was mentioned in developing countries, in the EU, we used to think that consequences were for others, while responsibility was for us. This is changing very quickly and very dramatically in Southern Europe, even more than in the rest of the EU, but there is a clear acceleration. So short-term advantages must blend with this long-term interest. Regional and local authority should take the lead on this. For instance, and again, this was mentioned during the masterclass by Professor Gamene, it's very important that we start by doing the thing where we can embed climate mitigation and adaptation. Housing is an obvious example. Transport, urban transport is another obvious example. And local investment finally can also drive growth in clean tech industry, which happens again, mostly in city, leverage urban demand to boost innovation and growth. So some food for thought for the substantive discussion. And again, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Now let's move to the discussion part. And let me invite 10 speakers from diverse backgrounds. I'm very happy to see all the 10 speakers in this room from different backgrounds, national government, local government, private sector, international city networks, and so on. Let me start by inviting Ashif Nawaz Shah, head of CHAMP Impact and the Global Partnership from GCOM. So GCOM, thank you co-hosting this event. And then Ashif, C40 cities and the Global Covenant of Mayors are supporting this CHAMP coalition for high ambition multi-level partnerships. And one of the aims of this CHAMP initiative is to create inclusive process that enable local governments to contribute to NDCs. You see that several countries have already submitted their third round of NDCs. Can you update us what the progress is, and then also share some insight from your CHAMP initiative? So floor is yours. You have.
Thank you, and I'll try as much as possible to keep it time. First of all, thank you so much to the OECD for the warm welcome, and we're very happy to be co-organizing this session. Thank you also to Tashi and Lamia for spelling out what CHAMP stands for, so I do not have to, and I will refer to it solely as CHAMP from here on out. So before I get to the meat of your question, I think what we've heard, at least since I've joined today, is that local action is incredibly important. And in fact, our global targets, our global aims, our global goals cannot be achieved without that local action and coordinating that local action with national level policies and targets. We heard in the master class just before this session that the local level is where the case for climate action is made, where communities are won over. And what we need to do at the global stage, and what CHAMP seeks to do, is to make that case to the national governments, to recognize the criticality of city and region level action to the fulfillment of their pledges and goals. So with that philosophy, we worked very closely with Bloomberg Philanthropies and the COP28 presidency in the UAE to launch CHAMP. CHAMP has now been endorsed by 75 national governments, and those 75 national governments represent over a third of global emissions and population, and nearly 2/3 of global GDP. And what unites these countries, these 75 national governments, who are very diverse from all over the map, is a shared recognition, or the beginning of a shared recognition, that the goals of the Paris Agreement cannot be achieved without aligning national climate plans with local delivery capacity and local priorities. So coming to the question specifically around NDCs, one of the key aspects of CHAMP is getting commitments from national governments to be working in a more concerted fashion with local and regional governments on their upcoming current cycle of nationally determined contributions, but also other climate plans and policies such as NAPs and VSAPs, etc. And so at that level, what CHAMP primarily is a political declaration. And so if we look at the NDCs as political documents that have a sort of declaration of intent at a high political level, we've seen from, I believe, 8 of the countries that are CHAMP endorsers, 6 of those NDCs reference strengthened multi-level processes, strengthened subnational engagement. 4 of those NDCs actually reference CHAMP by name. So on a symbolic political level, that's one sort of area of progress that we can point to. The second piece, and this is what I suppose we would argue CHAMP is doing differently and why we're so keen to support it, is that CHAMP is a commitment to structural reform, right? So a structural reform that is able to facilitate both top-down and bottom-up engagement and build those processes into the business as usual of policy making at the national government level, and then translate that as well to the local level to ensure that local plans aren't just being made in with the perspective of local needs and priorities, but also how they tie into national goals and policies. So that commitment to structural reform can look very different in different countries, but what it does involve is embedding local consultations as part of the process of policy making, reflecting city and regional level data and targets in national level data and targets, and really empowering mayors and regional leaders with the tools, resources, and authority to deliver the action that needs to be delivered. The last point I'll make about what JAMP is doing differently is it's bringing coherence to implementation efforts. And this is in large part due to the ecosystem of partners that have gathered around JAMP to support this initiative. You'll hear from Roher and you'll hear from UNEP, both of whom are part of that ecosystem of partners. And what that really looks to do is align various efforts that are taking place at the national level or at the local level to ensure that duplication is not happening, to ensure that opportunities are being taken advantage of, and to ensure that whatever processes are underway to enable climate action planning at the national level, that cities and regions are able to capitalize on those processes. Examples of where such coherence is being demonstrated, I think we can point to Brazil. The Brazilian NDC, of course, was one of the first, and it directly referenced JAMP and this concept of climate federalism. But concretely and on the ground, we are working with the federal government on the Green Resilient Cities program, PCVR, and we're working with them to identify 100 projects across 50 cities, one each for mitigation and adaptation, that can contribute to national climate goals and targets as defined by the NDC. So that is the kind of city level data analysis that we're providing that also links to the project identification process that's so critical to building pipelines of projects that actually deliver emissions reductions. And another example from the Philippines, just recently, we conducted the first of what we hope is many more workshops with local government units across the Philippines to provide a direct route for them to input into the nationally determined contribution process, the development of the NDC. And in addition, in Morocco, we're working again with the federal government at the Ministry of Interior, but also with the associations of regions and associations of communes to really streamline the way national climate plans are being translated into the territories and the local municipalities. So it works differently in different countries, obviously, because governance structures vary. But what we're seeing is a growing recognition of the value of these processes in surfacing not just better collaboration between national and local and regional levels, but also in some instances, surfacing opportunities to enhance ambition and enhance implementation of these policies that are made at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that thorough demonstration of the progress and how JAMP is making a different, can make it differently. And this conference and then also all the participants here can also be part of the ecosystem that you described, and then we can also participate in that avenue together. So now the second speaker is actually from Japan, Yutaka Matsuzawa, Vice Minister, Ministry of Environment, Japan. He's actually providing a video from Japan. So the video is ready now, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matsuzawa Yutaka. I'm Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs at the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the OECD team and the Global Covenant of Mayors for organizing this important session. Climate change is an urgent issue facing all of humanity. In February, Japan set new targets of a 60% reduction in fiscal 2035 and a 73% reduction in fiscal 2040, compared to levels in fiscal 2013. reducing emissions on the straight path towards achieving net zero by 2050. We submitted them as a new MDC to the UNFCCC Secretariat on the same day. To achieve these targets and net zero by 2050, Japan will promote actions based on the Paris Agreement, ensuring the participation and cooperation of all actors, including the national government, local governments, businesses, and citizens. The TACAR program is an effort to help national and local governments align their climate actions with global goals, and the Ministry of the Environment of Japan has been supporting this important program. I'd like to pay tribute to all those involved in achieving outcomes through it. While climate change is a challenge common to all humankind, the natural and social circumstances in each city and region are different. It is therefore important to take a place-based approach to drive environmental actions tailored to local context. In addition, the 6th United Nations Environment Assembly last year adopted the resolution on synergies proposed by Japan and agreed to enhance synergies to tackle global environmental challenges and achieve the SDGs. What I'd like to stress here is that leveraging synergies is very common in local level, but in global scale synergies is often totally forgotten and fall into fragmented approach. Therefore, it is crucial for us to learn from local level experiences in order to solve local and global environmental challenges in an integrated manner. I have had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Yamanaka of Yokohama City, Governor Koike of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and Mayor Alejandro Edel of Cali City in Colombia, Governor Chachat of the Bangkok Metropolitan Government, all of whom are also GCOM members. They are truly frontrunners in implementing integrated solutions for both local and global challenges. We have such local leaders in the world. I reaffirmed with them the need to work with local governments to tackle global environment issues. The TACAR policy paper launched in this session introduces initiatives that have demonstrated synergies through a localized approach, showing examples of Japan's initiatives of decarbonization leading areas and regional circular and ecological spheres. We hope you find the policy paper useful for your region. In closing, the city of Yokohama will host the International Horticultural Expo in 2027. As Yokohama is one of Japan's decarbonization leading areas, this event will be an important opportunity for us to confirm collaboration among stakeholders and the need for integrated actions in order to build sustainable societies. We look forward to seeing you in Yokohama for this landmark event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vice Minister Matsuzawa. And let me recognize that Japan is one of the strongest supporters to this TACAR program. Now continue the national perspective. I have a pleasure to introduce Vice Minister Fahri Hamzah from the newly created Ministry of Housing and Settlement Areas, the Republic of Indonesia. So Vice Minister Hamzah has more than 20 years of experience in the member of the House of the Representative in Indonesia. Now you have a strong leadership of the new Prabowo administration, committing to addressing the country's housing shortages by providing 3 million adequate homes every year. So ensuring that these homes are not only affordable and adequate, but also sustainable. So Vice Minister, how do you or how are you going to tackle this ambitious task together with the local government? So floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Tadashi. Thank you for introducing me. Ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, my name is Fahri Hamzah. I'm the Vice Minister of Housing and Settlement. I want to explain some of the basic ideas of the newly institution or the ministries under the newly elected President Prabowo. In maintaining the stability of global economy, the participation of all nations is expected by supporting fair trade, promoting inclusive growth, and investing in sustainable development. Under Indonesia's national strategy on SDGs, we integrate green and smart city initiative into national climate policies and mainstreams climate objective into rural, urban, and national development policies. Real estate and construction sectors in Indonesia contribute 15 to 16% of our GDP and support sustainable development through green and smart city initiative. Although Indonesia has a backlog of housing, as you know that we have 15 million backlog for the new housing and 26 million of inadequate or substandard housing need to be renovated. But the government introduced the 3 million houses program from the Ministry of Housing and Settlement, aims to address this issue, but this program will focus on providing housing such as in the city area. We start to campaign of the building of the vertical housing, especially to relocate residents from slums areas, ensuring better living condition and efficient land use amidst high land prices in city area. In the rural area and the coastal areas, we do a massive renovation program to improve housing quality and accommodate extended families, especially in the village and remote coastal region. In supporting infrastructure, we are ensuring the access to clean water and proper sanitation will be integrated into all housing projects. On the other hand, Indonesia also faced several problems while providing houses, such as lack of implementation of green housing design and decarbonized housing design. In addition, the construction sector consumes 30% of Indonesia's total energy, with projection indicating an increase to 50% by 2030, underscoring the urgency of energy-efficient building practices. To address this problem, Indonesia needs to learn from OECD best practices to get valuable insight from experienced OECD countries in addressing these issues. As we know, the OECD prioritizes not just only economic stability, but also the achievement of a sustainable environment, as outlined in the Sustainable Development Goal SDGs. Besides that, Indonesia also continue to strengthen building code regulation through update and enforce national and local government level to mandate green and energy efficient design, including in residential housing. Integrate green building design standard into national housing initiative, such as the 3 million houses program, to demonstrate scalable models of eco-friendly, affordable housing. Establish and integrate national green housing database to evaluate energy efficiency and emission performance in collaboration with academia and the private sectors. Therefore, our targets are social and economic, including to develop affordable, resilient, and eco-friendly housing, which is integrated to green infrastructure development program, and promote sustainable urban growth, advancing ESG standards, and enhancing city liability and investment appeal. Let us continue to strengthen our partnership, bridge the gap between economies, and uphold the principle of openness, transparency, and mutual respect. Together, we can shape an inclusive global economy, build sustainable environment, and establish climate urban resilience to be ready for the challenges and opportunities of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Minister. Now let's go to the international perspective. And then now I have a pleasure to introduce Laura Vallejo. Laura, you recently joined the European Climate Foundation and are directing the diplomacy team. Previously, you co-chaired the UNFCCC's Sharm el-Sheikh mitigation work program. My question here is how is this work progressing, and can you share your perspectives on how to accelerate local climate action? Floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here and to come after such a esteemed speaker. I'll speak with 2 different hats, as you mentioned. The current one, which is working at the European Climate Foundation, where our CEO, Laurence Toubiana, played a really important role in supporting the advent of the Paris Agreement. Just to also remind everyone that this year, on the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement, there are a lot of discussions on how can we make this agreement even more fit for purpose for the current challenges that we're seeing today. And in effect, it's less a revolution than an evolution. I think the CHAMP initiative has been really thought from the start of the Paris Agreement, where really the idea to have multi-level governance was not a bug, but a feature of making the Paris Agreement effective. So from that perspective, it's definitely a very important evolution, one that needs to be protected and hopefully advanced further at the upcoming COP30. I would say within the official process, there are maybe 2 ways in which this could be made more formal, so to speak. One, you've already touched upon, is better integration of subnational actors in the nationally determined contributions, the climate plans, which are expected this year. And another one is to think, can we have another space for these actors to have even more of a voice and a more central role in those negotiations? So there are a couple of ideas being floated around. I would just mention a couple. One, do we want to have a section of the global stocktake, this exercise where every 5 years we take the pulse of international climate action? Do we have maybe a chapter, maybe a section, or something that focuses specifically on the role of some national actors and the contribution they make? So that's a first idea for discussion. The second one is, do we need to have even a more formal space, another subsidiary body, for instance, dedicated not to governments, but to subnational actors, because they can play a very important role as a kind of insurance policy of maintaining action on climate, even in, you have different pools and pools of political changes, but subnational actors see the local benefits and therefore can be a force to press us forwards, even in, headwinds that we're knowing today. The second hat that I would put on is actually my past responsibility, as you mentioned, as co-chair of the mitigation work program. This is, for people that may not be aware of it, within the international negotiations, a very new and interesting idea that was trying to bring together 2 sets of discussions which usually happen in silos. The mitigation piece, which gets surprisingly little airtime in terms of headings, and the finance and the investment piece. So it's trying to bring the 2 together, recognizing that it's impossible to have mitigation action if you don't have the necessary investments that, of course, as like anything under UNFCCC, the starting points and the circumstances are very different. But also it's quite specific, the investment in mitigation compared to the investments in adaptation. So this was the kind of framework and the starting point. And I was co-chair of this work program for 2 years. In the second year, we decided to, as the often vaunted push for implementation goes, focus on what can really push implementation in a context of, UNFCCC discussion becoming sometimes very tense, and the new objective for climate finance taking center space. So we wanted to focus on what can advance no matter what. And we focused, as you mentioned, on cities, but also on buildings taken together. So I want to maybe direct everyone to look at what we have done in the formal platform of negotiations, focusing on buildings and on cities. We invited some experts for 2 days of discussion in a format called the Global Dialogue, and all the presentations and all the discussions are available online on the UNFCCC website. And I think this really brought home some very simple truth, including, of course, that there are different starting points, but that the subnational level is absolutely essential, and cities in particular have a huge role to play. And also kind of decentering ourselves a bit, that basically the good ideas can come from anywhere. And I think there's been a lot of productive and constructive exchange in that setting, emphasizing the importance of bringing together the scientific voice, the local policymakers' voice, and the kind of global climate governance framework. I would say we heard in particular from the IPCC, which, as you know, is having their special reports coming out shortly. Well, not shortly, but working on them actually. But they're working on this special report on cities, and still I think there's a lot of things to build on. And we had some of these really important insights presented. And I think it really helped connect some of the different streams of the discussion, a bit like what we're trying to do today. Thank you very much.
What a very useful insight. Now, Rogier van den Berg from the World Resource Institute, Global Director of Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. So Rogier, you have recently published a working paper on strengthening NDCs from through the involvement of cities, regions, and states. So could you share with us some key takeaways and then your insight? Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And Lamia, Cisa, it's fantastic that you organize this in a city that we all love, right? So and where we can learn from, and where the Paris Agreement, evolved from. So WRI, we are a non-profit think and do tank. I'm leading the cities work, and we're working with cities in many of the countries that are Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, I saw already, 6 of them belonging to the 10 largest economies of this world by 2050. I want to be a bit more operational, because I think we heard a lot about the challenge, and I think many of us understand the challenge. We do a lot of research. We are data nerds, right? We like to understand the real stuff. What are we talking about? So you see maybe a complicated diagram, but bottom line is, if we want to decarbonize cities, the blue, what you see, is buildings, which is the largest share of the contributor. The orange is transportation, the green is materials, and the dark green is waste. Right? Depending a little bit, and you all know that depending on where you are on this earth, these proportions differ, but this is what we know what to do. That's not the challenge, right? We know what to do. And our research shows that with the current technology, decarbonization, you can decarbonize 90%. You don't need new technology, right? We know what to do, and we have the technology. The good news is, and I think the current headwinds of the climate agenda kind of sort of overshadow that. The good news is that there's an enormous economic opportunity. And that is not wishful thinking, and that is not a sort of narrative spinning, right? The research shows that in a large share of this mitigation, there is an incredibly attractive business case. And in the countries that we work, independent of all the geopolitics that take place, there are already tipping points. I shared today in one of the questions and one of the discussions that in the electrification of matatus in Kenya, in Nairobi, where I lived, people demand electric vehicles and buses because they are more comfortable. You know, they're not noisy. You can charge your phone. So people standing in line. So there is a business case and there's a demand. And it all depends again on how the local enabling environment is set up. The challenge is, and that's the last bullet, that's the only bullet you need to read from all the bullets there, is that 2/3 of these emission reduction potential relies on national government support and multi-level partnerships. So it's only 1/3 of that mitigation potential that lies within the mandate of the city itself. So multi-level governance is not some sort of idea, let's do more together because we need to be more proactive, more successful, more efficient. It's the only way to do it. Well, coming down now to the national action plans, the NDCs that are coming in on a rolling basis, and the Brazil has the COP30 in Belém coming up, and we're all waiting for these NDCs to come up. So cities are part and parcel of successful national action planning, so they cannot be seen separate from that. And this is why we developed, under the CHAMP initiative, we developed stronger NDCs with city, states, and regions, which is a very practical guide providing tools, templates, databases, and in-depth country examples of best practice for countries to learn from. And we will see how successful we have been and how to what extent countries will have picked up our recommendations. But besides these recommendations, and you can find them on the internet, besides these recommendations, we also, together with the partners, we actively worked with 10 countries on NDC enhancements, organizing dialogues between national and local authorities, and identifying sectors and opportunities to make stronger NDCs. And what we've seen that a lot of NDCs lack the actual data specific to cities. So bringing that in is a very important part in order to measure and manage. Then I want to say two things, and don't worry, I'm not going to go in depth. Two examples of how multi-level government is not an end in itself, but an actionable operational opportunity. One is a groundbreaking investment in Brazil's urban peripheries, the Periferia Viva program, which WRI is working with the Brazil government, looking actually at upgrading the peripheries with housing, slum upgrading, and making them more resilient, working with 58 cities, probably 48. We had a discussion, Elisa and I, today. But I think this is an example where a national government used a sectoral thematic approach to set a target, to create momentum, and not unimportant, to create a shared knowledge base, a network of exchange between cities going through the same process and opportunity. And the last, which is not less of a programmatic approach, but more of a market transformation. This is our involvement, WRI India, who is delivering 50,000 electric buses in India. And this is interesting because the India government, and very smart, said to us that the diesel bus is still cheaper than the electric bus. But it all depends, right? It all depends. So we aggregated the demand in 169 cities, create a new procurement strategy, disentangled operators, energy providers, procurement processes, and reshuffle them in such a way that without subsidies, the electric bus is 30% cheaper than the diesel bus. So these type of market transformation, these type of multi-level governance processes where national government works actively, with different set of stakeholders and cities to achieve scale, not one pilot project, but scale, I think is the opportunity that we see ahead of us. And so I want to leave it with here, and I hope many others will follow.
Thank you, Rokia. Let's continue this operational discussion now. We have a pleasure to have Lynn O'Grady, Deputy Director, Sustainable Infrastructure Group, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So Lynn, you are one of the architects of the EBRD Green Cities program, mobilizing now the 7 billion euros to tackle environmental challenges and policy through investment and policy reform in cities. So as we find also in our TACAR program, the consistent challenge is a diversity of capacity across local government. And could you tell us about lessons you have learned from your work with different diverse cities that you are working in the Green City program, and then how cities can bridge this capacity gap? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tadashi, and thank you, OECD colleagues, for this opportunity to speak. I know that I was a late addition, and thank you very much for including me in this panel. So just by way of some background, I lead the EBRD Green Cities program, which is the bank's flagship program for delivering green and sustainable investments in cities. And this was born in the wake of the 2015 Paris Agreement. And as a consequence, it's now in its 10th year of operation. And actually, just as an aside, when I was walking here this morning, it just took me back to 2016, Tadashi, because we came here to OECD to work with you and with ICLE on the GCAP methodology, which I will talk about shortly. So sort of very happy and nostalgic memories. So far, I mean, the program has gone from strength to strength. It was really an experiment. It was developed by myself and Nigel Jollins, who is now sailing around the world. And where it stands is that through this program, 96 green and sustainable projects have been financed across the bank's region. That investment is 3 billion of EBRD investment into these cities across a network of 60 cities and benefiting in the region of 76 million people. So Tadashi has asked me to go through the lessons learned from 10 years. And I've picked 3. So I think the first is the importance of having an effective planning tool. And what we have is a Green City Action Plan. And this is based on an evidence-based methodology, which, as I've said, was developed with OECD and with ICLE, and more recently, WRI have joined in working with us on this. And what this methodology does, it identifies environmental challenges, and those environmental challenges are in turn used to identify investments in a city. There's also stakeholder engagement as well, and I don't have enough time to talk about that. It's multi-sector, so it covers the whole raft of investment needs in cities. So, of course, this is urban transport, water and wastewater, buildings, energy efficiency, solid waste, renewables, I could go on. It's linked, all those actions, investments it identifies clearly are connected to the national NDC. And I think also in the spirit of partnership, a number of those, and it's really nice to be on this table with partners because a number of those GCAPs have been undertaken with GCOM. We worked with GCOM in Belgrade. With C40, we worked with them in Warsaw, and in the EU, we worked with the EU in Vilnius. So I think, partnerships I've been told to look at lessons learned, looking ahead for me in the times we're in partnerships is all important. I mean, picking up on this issue of this multi-level, and you've got the central government and the cities. We involve the central government in a Green City Action Plan as required depending on the level of fiscal decentralization. So in a country like Egypt, which is where we've done 3 Green City Action Plans, which is heavily centralized, you need to involve the government ministries. In a country, for example, like Romania, which is fiscally decentralized, there is some involvement of the central government, but by and large, you're working with the cities. So that's my first lesson learned. The second is, it's sort of so simple, but it's the winning formula. You have to connect that plan, that Green City Action Plan, with the investment. And I'm really picking up on the point made by Lola. You know, green cities, it's about, we've got our plans, we've got our knowledge sharing, but it's about delivery. So what we do to ensure skin in the game, we only work with a city on a Green City Action Plan when we have identified an investment. And then the Green City Action Plan identifies follow-on investments for us to finance the city themselves or other financial institutions, so that we can have a meaningful engagement with the city. And the third lesson learned is cities vary. Cities are large and small. They vary in terms of their institutional capacity. They vary in terms of the level of fiscal decentralization. So, and we, in this respect, we very much support and endorse this multi-level approach of CHAMP. So at one end of the spectrum, we will lend to the government and then on lend to the city. For example, in Samarkand, bank financed electric buses there. It's a highly centralized country, so we lent to the city, we lent to the country and on lent to the city. In other jurisdictions, there is fiscal decentralization, and so we lend to the city or to the city utility company or to the private sector, and noting that that is very much EBRD's preferred business model. About 50% of the Green Cities portfolio is there. It's in this non-sovereign space. So I think I'm running out of time. So I will just finish by just saying that innovation is very important. We're bringing bond issuances into the program. We want to look at land value capture. I would really like to have some ideas on funding resilient solutions. We're doing a lot of thinking at the bank. So just in summary, the key lessons learned were effective planning, ensuring this link between the plans and investment, and deploying a wide spectrum of financial instruments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I have 4 more speakers before I open the floor. So thank you for your cooperation to keep time strictly in 5 minutes. Now I have 2 speakers from a local perspective. The first one is from Yokohama, Mr. Norio Tomioka, Executive Director, International Affairs Bureau, City of Yokohama. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. It is a great pleasure to join the session today. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude to OECD directors, Ms. Lamia Kamau-Shawi and Ms. Jo Tyndall, for the Takar Yokohama report. Yes, I love the Takar, the word Takar. It's a very nice word. My special thanks also go to Mr. Tadashi Matsumoto and his colleagues, who have undertaken a comprehensive assessment of Yokohama's climate policies and given us many recommendations. We, the city of Yokohama, are truly honored to be the first city that OECD has applied Takar framework at the city level. Regarding the question, what lessons can be drawn from local climate action to accelerate net zero transition, I would like to introduce you a few Yokohama's initiatives focusing on the role of a city that is, in my opinion, demonstrating both leadership and partnership. The Takar report highlights Yokohama's diverse climate actions. As Director Kamau Shawi kindly introduced in her opening remark, one of the initiatives is our decarbonization efforts in the central business district of Yokohama. Yokohama has set a city target to reduce CO2 emission by 50% by 2030, which is more ambitious than the target of national government. The specific target of this area is far more ambitious, aiming net zero CO2 emission by 2030 in the area. More than 130,000 people are now working in this area, and it accounts for 10% of business sector's energy consumption in the entire city. The keywords of the climate action in this area are leadership and partnership. In order to achieve net zero, the city of Yokohama has proactively led pioneering initiatives such as reducing energy consumption in the close cooperation and partnership with the citizens, the private sectors, and the national government. On the other hand, let me also introduce Yokohama's international cooperation. The keywords are again leadership and partnership. The city of Yokohama has been eager to cooperate with other Asian cities, including Bangkok, Da Nang, Metro Cebu, to share our experience and expertise in climate actions for more than a decade. We are very happy to find that OECD has emphasized the importance of such a cooperative approach in the Takao report, as we believe that cities face some common urban challenges, and we can inspire each other for scaling up and speeding up climate actions. The city of Yokohama has been also contributing to global movements through international seminars and platforms. We were very honored to welcome IPCC experts and OECD Director Tyndall to Yokohama last month for knowledge-sharing seminars hosted by the city of Yokohama. Also, our innovative platform, Asia Smart City Conference, welcomes more than 2,000 participants from the world, all over the world, every year. Let me conclude my comments by stressing that leadership and partnership are critical to the city's role in order to achieve a sustainable, greener future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomioka-san, and also thank you for your cooperation for making our report happen. Now, the second local perspective is from Vincent Fouché, Director of Prospective Studies, Partnerships, and Territorial Innovations, Aix-Marseille Provence et Métropole, France. The floor is yours, Vincent.
Je vais parler en français, avec votre autorisation, Monsieur le Président. Je sais que ça fait plaisir à certains ou certaines. D'abord, merci pour l'invitation et heureux de revenir sur les lieux de l'OCDE que je connais bien depuis un certain nombre d'années. Pour vous parler d'Aix-Marseille-Provence, la métropole du sud de la France, très investi avec l'ensemble de ces villes, avec la ville de Marseille, dans des programmes qu'on pourrait appeler TACAR. Nous y sommes, ça s'appelle autrement, on les développe autrement, mais on se retrouve bien dans les enjeux de climat et résilience qui sont évidemment des problématiques très fortes pour nous. Nous avons un programme important avec l'État et aussi sur Marseille en grand avec un effort de mobilité pour décarboner notre mobilité de manière très ambitieuse. Nous avons la démarche ville neutre en carbone, partenariale ville et métropole et avec un ensemble d'autres partenaires. Mais la question que Tadashi m'a posée pour cette intervention est une question sur une démarche un peu plus exploratoire et sur un enjeu qui va être, je crois, assez commun à beaucoup de métropoles autour de la table, beaucoup de contextes urbains dans beaucoup de pays, qui consiste à penser que l'intensification urbaine est un des défis majeurs de nos territoires urbains et que cette intensification urbaine est une des politiques, il n'y en a pas tant que ça, qui offre des co-bénéfices sur un ensemble d'objectifs qui sont les nôtres, notamment autour des objectifs du développement durable, les ODD ou les SDGs en anglais. Cette intensification urbaine, je vais essayer très rapidement d'en faire une démonstration, elle nous permet d'atteindre des objectifs de décarbonation, nos objectifs de transition démographique, nos objectifs de moindre consommation d'espaces naturels et agricoles, nos objectifs de moindre consommation ou de demande en ressources et en matériaux, mais aussi dans une période difficile sur les finances publiques, de moins faire appel à la dépense publique. Donc c'est vrai que cette intensification urbaine est à multiples co-bénéfices, notamment dans un territoire comme Aix-Marseille-Provence, avec 92 communes, 3000 km². On est une sorte de mini-France, de France miniature, très polycentrique, avec 75% de notre territoire qui est naturel. Mais au rythme où on a urbanisé notre territoire depuis les 30 ou 40 dernières années, si on continuait, dans 60 ans, on n'a plus d'espace naturel et agricole. Donc, il faut évidemment changer de modèle de développement territorial et c'est à ça que va nous servir l'intensification urbaine sur laquelle nous réfléchissons. Je n'ai pas un bilan à vous présenter, mais plutôt une réflexion et des intentions à réfléchir et à partager tous ensemble. Donc, 5 messages à partager et sur chacun de ces messages, on pourrait passer 1 heure, mais vraiment aller à l'essentiel. Je vois Tadashi qui tremble. Mon premier message, c'est que l'intensification urbaine nous permet de quitter le modèle urbain extensif très consommateur d'espace que nous avons connu depuis maintenant 50 ou 60 ans. Plus de densité, c'est moins d'espace urbanisé. On le sait, tous les chiffres de l'OCDE, et d'ailleurs le rapport qui était produit ici pour le TACAR le démontre également, les espaces ruraux et périurbains sont ceux dans lesquels on consomme le plus d'espaces naturels et agricoles. C'est un peu contre-intuitif, on a l'impression souvent que ce sont les métropoles qui consomment le plus, mais ramenés par habitant, les habitants des métropoles et ceux des espaces les plus denses sont les plus précautionneux finalement sur l'empreinte territoriale de l'extension urbaine. Et la densification ou l'intensification, qui consiste à répondre aux besoins dans l'espace des territoires déjà urbanisés, elle est déjà là. Elle est déjà présente. Dans un territoire comme Aix-Marseille-Provence, on est à 80% de densification dans les logements que nous construisons. Donc c'est déjà là, c'est déjà présent. Mais il va falloir amplifier cette dynamique-là. Mon second message, c'est que l'intensification, c'est aussi un enjeu de décarbonation et un enjeu crucial pour nos plans climat. En effet, les modes de vie, la mobilité sont extrêmement différents selon les densités et les faibles densités sont dépendantes à la voiture, sont celles où les distances parcourues sont les plus longues, celles où la consommation d'énergie et les émissions de CO2 sont les plus importantes. Dans un territoire comme Aix-Marseille-Provence, les habitants des faibles densités émettent 4 fois plus de CO2 par habitant que ceux qui habitent dans les fortes densités. Donc si on veut atteindre des objectifs de décarbonation, ce n'est pas tellement un choix, il faut augmenter, viser davantage des densités plus élevées et autant que possible densifier et intensifier les espaces déjà desservis par les transports en commun. Et avoir en tête que la ville dense et mixte est la seule qui soit marchable. On n'a pas 50 possibilités là aussi. Et l'enjeu de marcher n'est pas seulement de faire du vélo, c'est que ça répond à toutes les catégories de population. Tout le monde ne peut pas faire du vélo comme tout le monde ne peut pas conduire. Et ce sont des réponses pérennes si on fait cette densification dans les espaces les plus desservis par les transports en commun. Troisième message, c'est que la densification, elle répond aux besoins de demain. Elle ne répond pas tellement aux besoins du passé qui sont derrière nous. Pourquoi on a fait autant d'extensions urbaines depuis 10, 15, 20, 30 années? C'est parce que nous avions une forte croissance démographique, une forte croissance économique, une forte croissance des familles avec enfants qu'il fallait loger rapidement dans des espaces où ils avaient de la place. La maison individuelle a beaucoup répondu à ça, mais demain, le besoin n'est plus de cette nature-là, en tout cas pas dans des contextes comme le nôtre. Plus faible croissance économique, démographique, décohabitation, vieillissement. Ce sont d'autres tendances auxquelles nous devons faire face, et la densification, l'intensification peuvent être des réponses beaucoup plus adaptées dans ces nouvelles configurations. Et l'enjeu de la proximité, on en a parlé hier avec Carlos Moreno, redevient, ça l'a été et ça le redevient, une des réponses cruciales à offrir que la densification et l'intensification nous permettent de réaliser. Mon quatrième et avant-dernier message, c'est que les gisements pour faire cette intensification sont nombreux. Il y a des gisements par construction nouvelle dans les quartiers déjà là, c'est la densification bâtie, on la connaît, urbaniser les friches, surélever les bâtiments, mieux utiliser les fonds de jardin avec la densification douce. Il y a pas mal de manières de le faire. Mais il y a aussi toute une diversité de réponses dans les bâtiments déjà existants en les utilisant mieux. La vacance de logement, on la connaît, on sait où elle est, il faut agir dessus très fortement. Mais on peut penser aussi au meilleur usage des équipements publics, privés. La chronotopie, c'est-à-dire partager selon les heures de la journée ou les jours de la semaine des équipements qui sinon sont très peu occupés. On peut aussi penser, et on a des chiffres sur le territoire d'Aix-Marseille-Provence, que des logements qui ont été construits il y a 30 ans pour loger des familles avec enfants, notamment des grandes maisons, sont aujourd'hui sous-occupés, voire très sous-occupés. Et bien sur un territoire comme le nôtre, on a un logement sur 6 qui est très sous-occupé, c'est-à-dire l'écart entre le nombre de personnes et le nombre de logements est très important. Il dépasse 2 à 3 pièces. Donc, il y a un potentiel très important. Mon cinquième et dernier message, c'est que la densification, malheureusement, elle est souvent mal accueillie dans les quartiers qui sont concernés et visés. Et donc, nous devons déployer de nouvelles ingénieries, de nouvelles politiques publiques. Et toute notre boîte à outils, qu'elle soit nationale ou locale, doit être revisitée pour réussir cet enjeu de la densification dans des logiques de gagnant-gagnant. Il faut que les quartiers qu'on va densifier voient leur qualité de vie améliorée et donc que l'on fasse la preuve avec nos politiques publiques que l'on sait améliorer la qualité de vie des gens qui sont là en même temps qu'on va y accueillir de nouveaux habitants. Et c'est pour ça que nous avons au sein de notre territoire ce qu'on appelle une communauté apprenante, publique-privée, pour trouver les solutions à cet enjeu-là. C'est sans doute le grand défi de ce siècle, parmi d'autres certainement, mais celui-là, il est important. Merci.
Oh, I wish I would join this discussion, but I'm sorry we don't have we have two strong international perspectives to close and the multi-stakeholder partnership perspectives. So now I have the pleasure to introduce Ruth Dokuto, Deputy Director, Climate Change Division. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation, representing UNEP among such committed partners. It's very difficult to talk about someone on the ground giving very specific examples, but I'll try. So UNEP works with countries and cities across the globe to achieve SDG 13, which is, I think, the call of this meeting on climate action for many years. Urban areas, as we have heard, occupy less than 1% of the Earth's land surface, but house more than half of the population and generate more than 70% of global emissions. And I think we heard from Roger that transport, buildings, and waste are the largest contributors. So it's not, as we said, not rocket science. The latest UNEP emissions gap report tells us that we're heading towards a global temperature rise of 2.6 to 3.1 degrees by the end of the century. So we need to slash emissions while ensuring the transition is just and people-centered. Only a coordinated approach, we believe, and action at the global, regional, national, and local levels can actually lead to success. It is essential that, therefore, and we believe that, to make cities, and we all believe that, an integral part of the solution in fighting climate change. It is at the city level where the pace and impact of climate action can really truly accelerate. We see this evidence, and I was discussing with Roger, by the local 2030 report, which finds that 70% of climate solutions lie with subnational jurisdictions, but the mandate is only 30% because 70% lies with the national government. And this is why multi-level governance and alignment of policies is so important. Cities are ecosystems who have a direct impact on the quality of our lives, and functioning urban ecosystems help clean our air, water, cool our indoor spaces, and support our well-being by shielding us from hazards, what we heard in the beginning, climate risks, and allowing us to live in a healthy state. So I'm going to bring this discussion to the nature-based solutions and how it's important to have green areas and nature-based solutions in cities. They really offered powerful opportunities. Research shows that investing in urban resilience, ecosystem restoration, and green infrastructure can unlock 1.5 trillion in economic benefits annually by 2030. So through our generation restoration project in UNEP, for instance, in Mexico City, we're strengthening citizen participation in promoting ecosystem restoration to help the city to bring nature back into the urban environment. I think it's the and I forgot the name, but was talking about densification and avoiding urban sprawl, but also using the city fiber to bring nature back into cities. So it's densify maybe vertically, but not everywhere. So we can still have the green spaces needed for ecosystem services. In Rio de Janeiro, for instance, through another project, we're working with local partners to promote urban and peri-urban agriculture, improving food security, restoring ecosystems, and building climate resilience in vulnerable communities. And I can go on, but I won't because we don't have the time. But in Johannesburg, which is a GEF finance project, we work with the city to retrofit 172 social housing units with solar water heaters, solar panels, energy efficient lighting, etc. And I just wanted to bring back the issue that the Indonesian colleague was talking about. And I would like to applaud the approach. Building 3 million social housing is massive. And if we do it and you lock in energy efficiency, resource efficiency, and all the circularity aspects and reducing embodied carbon is a lighthouse for all, and it's affordable. It's a lighthouse for all the developing countries in the world to actually take the lead. So we work through the Global Alliance of Buildings and Construction with UNEP to bring these lessons learned to our 270 partners and work with them exactly to do that. And also talking about the GEF, and here we work together with WRI, Clayton C40 on a program called Urban Shift, where actually we support 55 cities to put climate and nature and the city at the center of the city policies. And we also have city academies and finance academies. We have partners like EBRD working with us on that. So we totally are aligned with the importance of capacity building, having planning and finance. Another area I think that we can think about that cities can really slash emissions and support sustainable development is food waste. Food waste is a massive urban issue and offers both an economic opportunity and a cost-effective climate solution. 80% of food is expected to be consumed in cities by 2050. Because of course of the urbanization, and cities have a central role in tackling food waste. UNEP's food waste index report shows that in 2022 alone, 1 billion tons of food waste was wasted, and 60% happens at the household level, which is massive as well. And household level means city level, while we have 700 million of people every day facing hunger. Reducing food waste is a triple win. It can cut 40% of global methane emissions because it doesn't rotten, then the methane doesn't go into the atmosphere. It improves food security for over 700 million people affected by hunger, and it can save up to $1 trillion across the economy.
Can you try to wrap up? Sorry.
Because it's the first country in the world who actually managed to cut 50% of their food waste. And just to conclude, and I know that my time is, it's very important to bring climate action in the NDCs. We have said that over and over again, but I cannot not repeat it because it's very important, and it's very close to now in the COP13 Berlin. We have to have success, and NDCs will be part of the success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for the time mismanagement. Now I have last but not least, we have Kirsten Dunlop from the Climate Kick. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tadashi. Thank you, everyone. It's rather a privilege to be sitting on this complete lineup of organizations that we partner with, cities that we are proud to support, and a complete global lineup on what it takes to connect local action to global action. I'm speaking from the position of both the organization that is partnering with ICLE, for example, with Coxon here on my left, and other organizations in a consortium to deliver on the European Cities Mission that you heard from a colleague, Paolo from DG Clima, and to work across the world in partnership with California and South America, Africa on major urban transformation. So I'm speaking as the last on this panel from a place of implementation, and in particular the experience of the implementation gap in making the connection between local, regional, national, and global action. And I wanted to use three leitmotif or kind of topics to unpack that. One is meaning, one is math, and one is market. On the question of meaning, I think we've heard so often this question around the necessity of collecting local action into the global process and allowing the global process to scale down to local action, and the opportunity. The opportunity from a perspective of meaning is to make the spaces in which our economies are in service of people, as opposed to the situation we have now, where we have an economy that is not in service of people and people running desperately to be in service of the economy. If you look at the chaos unfolding right now, you can see the implications of that. But the things that I think become extremely pertinent, and I understand from the masterclass before, cities are the only places and spaces where we can make the connection between taking action on climate and nature and living well in fair, just, affordable, and prosperous terms. But I don't mean that rationally, I mean that emotionally. In contexts where they are tailored, they are culturally driven, they are based in food, they're based in clothing, spaces, places of housing, accommodation, and work. And I do think that's one of the elements we need to keep pulling through. We will not change this world if we keep trying to do it with our rational minds alone. So cities are the places where we make the stories of direct participation and the remaking of the world. The second element on math. One of the unique experiences of leading the European Cities Mission is to be able to start to look at the aggregate data of city action plans across hundreds of cities, collapsed into a short time frame of the objective of 2030 decarbonization for the whole city. So everything that we have been discussing and that you heard from Roger on built environment, energy, water, waste, transport, and so on. When you start to add that up, when you really start to look at the aggregate pace and scale of demand that cities require, we don't have the materials. We don't have the metals, and we don't have them available. We don't have the manufacturing timeframes ready. We don't have the skills ready. We have none of what it takes not to create the individual solutions, but to combine them and implement them in time. So thinking and reasoning in terms of cities and city scale and local action, local data aggregation, advanced market aggregations, and ways of understanding and seeing the problem at scale is our one chance to start to apply systems thinking and holistic practice in thinking about how are we going to launch innovation challenges for the alternative business models we need if we don't have the metals at the scale we need? How do we really leverage densification and proximity to start to design for resource efficiency in a completely different scale? So we dematerialize the way in which we're living in the global north, and we totally change our understanding of resources and the design of human life in urban contexts across the world. And that requires spatial planning, spatial energy planning, spatial resource planning. The only places we can do that are at city scale. But it also requires us to get beyond the idea that it's good to connect multi-level action because who are the holders of regulation? It also needs to go into the actual design. And the last piece is market. Green is extraordinarily good for business. Cities are the markets of the future, the places where large industries, small and medium enterprises can find advanced market commitments at scale, can find clear real economy demand, not the volatility that is traveling through global markets, can find clear, stable directional signal because it's so wired to local community action. So these are the places where we can look for and create the integration and the coherence we need to get business development to happen literally on the ground. But I think my call to action for this conversation and for the OECD, we need standards. We have suddenly entered an insanity of deregulation where we are pulling out and ripping out the guts of everything we've put in place to try and get action to move. We actually need significantly greater market-making regulation to enable business to come to the table. But if we don't have the regulation, then let's get the standards in place. Let's get proxies led by cities, created with regions, shared with communities, not just for formal communities, but for informal communities, because cities encompass both. And I want to just finish with a reminder, 2 degrees of global warming is 5 degrees on land and 8 degrees in cities. We are going to face UN cities everywhere. We need to start designing for this mobilization of action and the implementation gap, really led by what it makes to take markets in the places we love.
Thank you very much for the strong comments. Obviously, no time to open the floor. I'm very sorry for my problem of time. No.
You had a long list.
Well, so we have 2 closing speakers. The first is a youth movement. I have the pleasure to have Sami Laraki. You're an architect and urbanist. Floor is yours. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers of the OECD Urban Days for the opportunity to take part in this event. I'm truly delighted to be here with you today. My name is Sami Laraki. I'm an urban planner and architect at APRC Group, where I work on the design and development of logistics and industrial projects that are deeply loaded, rooted in local territories. At APRC, we believe that climate action must be local. That's why we integrate sustainability and resilience into every project, from solar energy, water management to low carbon construction and partnerships with local authorities. One of our recent projects reflects a strategic vision we call Proxilience, a concept inspired by Carlos Moreno, which combines proximity and resilience. The idea is simple: create activity zones that are connected to services, houses, jobs, and public transport. This reduces forced mobility, supports local economies, and reinforces social cohesion. Logistics projects, when placed in the right context, can become more than a just economic asset. It can be a driver of territorial balance. This approach is aligned with the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, which are the climate goals set by countries in the Paris Agreement. But to achieve them, we need to bring them to life locally by empowering cities and regions to act. I believe our generation has a key role to play to bridge the gap between vision and implementation, between ambition and action, between national strategy and local solutions. And to conclude, the transition will only be just and sustainable if it is built with the territories, for the territories, and my generation is ready to be the engine of that movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, discussant, Koksen Sahin, Senior Advocacy Officer, from the ICRE Europe. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tadashi. So thank you for this great panel. I think the panel put together different pieces of the puzzle so greatly together that as discussant, my task to wrap up and conclude with some key actionable points became quite easy. And I will build up on some of the topics that are mentioned by the kind of esteemed panelists. The first one is, I will kind of follow up from the point that Asif mentioned. He brought up the CHAMP, and Lola completed it by saying, actually, the principles of CHAMP are enshrined in the Paris Agreement. We need to continue building on this. We have reference to the multi-level action in the global stocktake. So going forward, we really need to build on the multilateral space, but also bring it back to home. And I would like to now go back to Japan Vice Minister's word on creating synergies. The cities know how to build synergies between different topics. They know also how difficult it is to make trade-offs on certain topics, as you mentioned. But they know that they need to do it, all of it, with people, for people, and planet. So this is definitely key. And I will also kind of want to follow up from the Vice Minister's, Indonesian Vice Minister's point on learning from each other. I think one of the key points is learning from each other. Cities learn a lot from each other. Then they also learn through the multi-level governance structures from the national level, what are the legislations, and they also provide feedback on how certain things can be improved, to be implemented, and so on. So I think we need to look at the multi-level governance idea, the CHAMP or Paris Agreement, or in the kind of the global stocktake references, as this is a key learning process for all actors. I will go back to the COVID times. We talked about social distance. Cities are the place where they reduce the social distance. In terms of multi-level governance, they reduce the social distance between policies that are being set at the higher level and how they are impacting people's lives. So this is my first point. And anyone who hasn't kind of submitted their NDC yet and are working on it should include the territorial chapter in it and a reference to the subnational governments. This is reducing the kind of the social distance between how we feel international multilateral space in our daily lives. That is the first actionable point, I think. The second one is I will pick up on the finance point. It is like the cities cannot implement, or the towns or regions cannot implement if it is not completed by funding. And the multi-level governance also helps improving the financial flows. Then you kind of improve, you avoid kind of repetitive funding structures and so on. This is also another learning partnership and feedback mechanism between all levels of governance. That is the second point. So it is like, look at it from the optimization, financial optimization perspective, where we have competing goals and difficult financial situation, cost of living is increasing everywhere. This is a kind of financial optimization opportunity. And then third one is on the standards markets optimization opportunity. We need to decarbonize all of our territories, which is a big market potential. We shouldn't, now I will go back to the lunchtime masterclass. We shouldn't look at it from a challenge perspective. This is an opportunity. And working with the local level, who knows communities, who knows the needs, we can really optimize the materials. And also building on the standards and the rules, we can really, at a massive scale, accelerate the decarbonization and align it with adaptation efforts. Thank you very much.
That concludes the session. I only thank all the participants who spoke really important points I have to digest. Thank you very much to close this session. Thank you for all the participation.